Hello, it's finally the month of October, the only month of the year that's really worth giving a shit about when you think about it. It's the Halloween month, which means it's time to talk about something spooky. Or in my case, something I've grown desensitized to within the first several hours of my exposure to this series, Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame is one of my all-time favorite gaming franchises. I love it so much, in fact, I actually started this channel with a Fatal Frame video, and that was exactly last Halloween. So it only makes sense that this Halloween I'll be talking about it again. And there's actually a good reason why I want to talk about this game in particular, and that is because I've only just experienced it for the first time last month. That game is Fatal Frame 3. Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented came out only on the PlayStation 2 and is the primary reason I actually own a PS2 now. I've only obtained it this exact year as well. It's a little bit weird in that it's the oldest item in my collection as of right now. I put it into a brand new case so it looks absolutely fabulous on the outside, but the foul smell the manual gives off definitely reminds me that the clock is ticking and it's only death that awaits us at the end of the journey. Anyway, this was the last installment in what I call the first generation of Fatal Frame games, because right after it the series received a heavy facelift in both how it looks and plays, starting with Fatal Frame 4. I'm saying this because I want to make it clear, this is my first time playing through a first-gen Fatal Frame game from beginning to end, before I've only had experience with the Nintendo published second generation, and it's probably not worth beating around the bush, so let's just come out and say it. This is my least favorite game in the series so far. I still haven't played Fatal Frame 1, which I'm currently looking into, but even then I got much more enjoyment out of Fatal Frame 2, 4, and even 5, which was my least favorite one before. Not that it says much, of course, it's still Fatal Frame, I still love it, but I've got way more issues with this one than with any other. Now, please keep in mind that my opinion of this game is somewhat retrospective. I look at it after I've experienced almost the entirety of the series, including its latest part, Fatal Frame Maiden of Black Water. I'm sure if I played the game back when it came out in 2005, I'd have a very different opinion, but I can't turn back time, so hopefully you understand where I'm coming from when sticking points inevitably emerge. The first thing I want to talk about is that this game's premise is brilliant. This time around you're not fighting against supernatural forces in any sort of physical location. All action takes place in your dreams. Every time our main protagonist, Ray, goes to bed, she has a dream of the manner of sleep. This is where the usual Fatal Frame business commences. We fight ghosts here, we solve puzzles here, we uncover the mystery behind everything here. The reason I like this as much as I do is actually because Fatal Frame 5 somehow managed to screw up in this aspect. In that game, you have a home base, your safe haven so to speak, where totally nothing scary of any kind occurs, and the game is structured in such a way where every chapter you go to the mountain, which is your haunted location in that game, and come back home at the end of it. The threat of being trapped in that place is pretty much non-existent because the characters you're playing as demonstrate on multiple occasions they can just turn back and return to safety at any point. Immersion suffers greatly because of that. And for that reason, I think Fatal Frame 3's premise might be the best one in the series, for it's incredibly effective at inducing dread in you. Sure, simply being lost somewhere with no exit in sight, like in Minakami Village from the second game, works great as well, but in this game, the nightmare's taking place in your head. You are technically in a safe environment, but no matter how you try, you cannot escape. Because at the end of the day you'll grow weary and fall asleep, and you'll be forced to endure the horrors of the manor again. That is a fantastic idea for a horror title, and I wish more games in the series attempted something similar. They typically put you into the shoes of characters dead set on achieving their goals, hoping their determination carries the game all the way through, but it doesn't really work that well in my opinion. So, good job on that, Fatal Frame 3. Now, progression through the game is done in the following way. You go to bed, you dream of the manner of sleep, you follow a specific objective, upon reaching which you wake up. You explore the manor bit by bit and move further and further into it with every night, uncovering new information about what's going on. In between the nights, you have brief intermission segments where you can take a breather and do some optional stuff if you want. All of that is great. I like the structure, I like the idea of the manner of sleep. My main problem with this game lies in the size and layout of that place. It's probably the biggest house in the series, but is it big enough to carry the entire game? No. Due to being restricted to just this one place, nights generally feel the same. The first couple of chapters for each character are fresh and exciting, but everything beyond that just blends together and becomes a blur. I've played the game twice. I can more or less remember Rei's first 2 chapters, Miku's first chapter, and bits and pieces of Kei's campaign, and the ending. The rest of the game is just running around the same rooms and hallways of the manor ad nauseum. Every chapter you find yourself traversing nearly the entirety of the available to you area, and while the objectives definitely vary from night to night, although not terribly so, you end up visiting the same places over and over again, and it's tiring. Yeah, you unlock more parts of the manor as the game goes on, but at nowhere near the rate that keeps you on your toes, which could be viewed as detrimental to the horror aspect of this title. It's kind of ironic how this place is called the Manor of Sleep, because I felt sleepy playing through some of the parts of this game. I was bored. Miku's special abilities do make for a nice change of pace because they make you rethink your approach to combat, but ever so slightly so, it's not enough to fend off the boredom completely, especially at the end of the game. Speaking of the combat though... Holy shit, it's so good! This game's combat is its saving grace. Had it not been as fun as it is, Fatal Frame 3 would have been a drag. The battle system is not terribly different from other entries in the series. Again, it's more or less Miku's special abilities that spice things up a little, but what stood out to me the most was the pace of the fights. You rarely see your enemies just casually hanging about the place. Most of the time they head straight towards you and try and hit you. The length of most encounters solely depends on you, and it feels incredibly refreshing after Fatal Frame 2. Fighting enemies in that game is painfully slow. Half the battle is just waiting for them to attack you. This is how the fights go. The ghost appears, you ready your camera, and it can take 20, 30, sometimes over 40 seconds before they remember they're actually hostile to you. It can be unbearable. I do appreciate the puzzling nature of enemy encounters in that game. Observing their behavior and figuring their Fatal Frame opportunities out is its own sort of fun, but good lord is that tiring. In this regard, Fatal Frame 3 gave me exactly what I wanted, quick bursts of action that didn't let me fall victim to the curse of the Sleepy Manor. This might be the fastest the pace of enemy encounters in Fatal Frame has ever been. Fatal Frame 4 comes in close second. I definitely enjoyed fighting in that game, but as much as I prefer having the ability to lock on the ghosts like in all second generation entries in the series, I feel like it was way too simple there. You just wait for the attack, then take a shot, and then take the second and the third in quick succession. It's not that I'm a big fan of difficulty in games, but the lack of challenge was certainly a valid criticism of that title. This is where Fatal Frame 3 also does a very good job. See, here, the timings for combo shots are unique to every enemy. After taking a Fatal Frame on a handmaid, for instance, you have to wait longer for the second shot than on, say, a Shrine Carpenter. This serves to keep the fights interesting and you engaged with them. Also, the length of the combo chain, that is the amount of shots you can take after the first successful Fatal Frame, seems to depend solely on the range of your camera. You're not just limited to 3. Taking Fatal Frames has an obnoxious knockback effect on the ghosts in this game. I was very annoyed with it at first, but then I realized that as long as the enemy was within the camera's range, I could keep doing combos on it. And I have to say, I prefer that over the standard 3-hit combo rule all the other games in the series follow. Except for, of course, Fatal Frame 5, where they ditched the combo system altogether, which was complete bollocks actually. I did not like that at all, and I don't want to talk about that. Anyway, the gist of the matter is, the combat in Fatal Frame 3 is very, very good. It's not perfect, mind you, ghosts still disappear into the walls where you can't hit them, which is always a problem in Fatal Frame, and the aforementioned knockback actively makes that issue 10 times worse, but for all intents and purposes, this combat holds the game together. It's fun, it's exciting, I kept playing through the tedium just to get to those moments, and when I did, I was happy I was playing that game. And that's kind of how I feel about Fatal Frame 3 overall. I've experienced pretty much the full spectrum of sensations when playing it, from boredom to joy, from being frustrated to no end, to finding something genuinely neat every now and again. The entire thing is just so polarizing, which unfortunately also applies to the story this game tries to tell. Unlike its two predecessors, Fatal Frame 3 has a theme, and that theme is survivor's guilt. The entire game is built around the idea of loss and blame. It doesn't really explore the concept of survivor's guilt, but rather follows the story of people who suffer from it. It's very similar to Fatal Frame 5 in that regard, which is themed around suicide. And I appreciate both these games committing to specific themes that does make them stand out among its peers as something more wholesome, but I don't think either does a very good job at that. See, it's not like Fatal Frame 3 fails to depict the struggles of its characters. We see them exhibit genuine emotions, we see why they are indeed tormented, but when I finished the game, that part of the narrative never really stood out to me. I didn't feel like I've experienced the tale of people deeply affected by trauma, and that's because I think the story isn't well balanced. Much like how my excitement from playing through the first few chapters died down when I found myself revisiting the same parts of the manor over and over, that initial focus on the pain our protagonists bear very quickly gave way to the mystery of the Kusei Shrine. For the majority of the game, we're running around this house, collecting junk and piecing together the story of what happened there. That mystery is the central part of the story, more so than anything regarding our characters. It just gets way more screen time, and I struggle to really care about what was happening to our heroes due to that. And that's a big shame, because if only that balance was there, we could have had a terrific story on our hands.
Ray, may I help you with something?
Oh, I just wanted to ask you.
On a more positive note, I really like what they did with the concept of human sacrifices in this one. They're not done just to temporarily seal the entrance to the world of the dead anymore, it's all about that chosen individual who will take on the pain and suffering of the living and cross to the other side with them, sacrificing themselves in the process. The sacrifice isn't just someone who satiates the abyss for a little while, it's someone who quite literally carries the weight of the world on their shoulders. And I'm in love with this idea. I honestly think the developers stumbled upon something truly brilliant here. They remodeled that simple concept and turned it into something genuinely awe-inspiring and even touching. You know, instead of, oh hey, we're just gonna pull this poor woman apart with ropes because of reasons. And with that, I wanna go back to what I said earlier about Fatal Frame 3 being my least favorite game in the series. We can talk potentially forever about all the different aspects of these titles and what each of them is better at, but I want to focus on simply how engaging they are. I'm sure most of us will agree that's what really matters at the end of the day. And again, it's all about balance. Every installment of the series can be boring. Running to the Osaka house for the 8 billionth time in Fatal Frame 2 is boring. Reading through dozens of document pages explaining the story of Fatal Frame 4 is boring. Fighting copy-pasted shrine maidens on every corner in Fatal Frame 5 is boring. but there was always something there that outweighed those moments. I was genuinely invested in the story of Fatal Frame 2 because, for one, it was simple and didn't overwhelm me with multiple storylines and different perspectives, focusing just on one character and that character's struggle, but also because it created a good sense of urgency. Having been put in Mio's shoes, I felt responsibility, I felt like I was on a mission, and there was a clear reason I did all the fighting and searching and puzzle solving. While Fatal Frame 4 is often criticized for its incomprehensible narrative, which I will say is kind of appropriate given the themes of that game, I never felt tired of just looking around in it. Mask of the Lunar Eclipse boasts absolutely stellar art direction. I don't know who in this mess of a dev team worked on designs in this game, but good lord have they delivered one of the most aesthetically pleasing video games I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. I feel like blooming when I'm playing that game. It's so good! And Fatal Frame 5, on top of doing pretty much everything Fatal Frame 3 does, also gives you huge areas to explore, the largest in the series, has tons of open space and various curiosities to look at, tells a more action-packed story than ever before, and also looks pretty thanks to them HD graphics, let's not forget that. The reason I liked it the least before was because it doesn't really have much of an edge to it. Instead, it simply brings a lot of little things to the table, you know, making the game bigger, bolder, more diverse and the like. But at the end of the day, those things were there. Fatal Frame 3 on the other hand gave me very little to fight that boredom with. Yes, it has probably the best combat in the series, and this story houses some very good concepts, but Fatal Frame isn't just about combat, and I really struggled to care about this game's story because I was too busy running around the manor looking for the bloody purifying candles. Make no mistake, I get no pleasure from bashing the game like that. I know people who genuinely love it and felt connected to its story, but sadly, that was not the case with me. I really hope I didn't come across as too negative in this video. What I ultimately think is that Fatal Frame 3 just somewhat misses the mark. As I said, it's still Fatal Frame, I still love it. I just love it a little less than others. Certainly don't get discouraged from trying it out for yourself. It's quite possible you'll have a completely different experience. Clashing opinions are a common occurrence in this fandom. Fatal Frame 3 is my least favorite game in the series, not because it's bad, but because it just doesn't do enough to really stand out in my opinion. If nothing else, it's just another Fatal Frame game, and that's not bad by any means. It's just that we've seen better. I really like that combat though, that was definitely the most enjoyable part of this experience for me. But with that, I think I'll wrap it up. Have a great Halloween, and goodbye.